Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a guest for you today, Danielle Orsino. And she is an author and she's going to talk about how creativity and talk about her works. And I think it's going to be a great conversation around the ideas of just creativity and authorship. And thanks so much for coming on. So, Danielle, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so start off by I always love hearing people's origin stories. So talk about that and how you got started and we'll dive right into it.
I can say that my origin story is probably not the most orthodox. I did start out first, I was a martial artist. I went to nursing and I thought I was going to be a physician assistant. I was actually in the CASPA cycle, applying and doing all that stuff. And then I met a patient who changed everything and derailed it. He was on long term IV treatment for Lyme disease. It was pretty aggressive. The doctor I worked for believed in dripping every single day for half an hour to 2.5 hours. Her office was in her home. She transformed her basement into her practice. I was hired to work weekends and holidays. And so I was there all the times you didn't want to see me. That's when you saw me. So a patient started the same day I did. He was quite sick. And we got to know each other because our journeys were side by side. And so one day he just decided he didn't want to do it anymore. He'd had enough. He'd been there about a year and a half. And so the deal he struck with the doctor was that he would drive, because he was from Pennsylvania, 5 hours, drip for 2 hours, go home, and then come back on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and drip. I knew this was going to last maybe a couple weeks. And within about a month, he was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. So he was like, you need to keep me entertained. And so I said, tell me something interesting about yourself. And somehow in the time I had known him, I knew that he was a Baltimore Ravens fan. So as a Giants fan, that just struck me. But it came out that he had been recruited by the CIA directly out of college. I don't know how that didn't come up. And so we went down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and, all the good stuff. And for some reason, out of my mouth came, do you know where Lyme disease came from? And he's, oh, Plum Island. Once again, conspiracy theories. And for some reason, I said, no, the Fae. I had not been reading any Fae books. I was actually on a Anne Rice reread vampire kick. And I just began to tell him a story about the Fae. I don't know where it came from. And every time he sat down, I just told him another story about this CIA agent who was trying to find out if the Fae were involved in Lyme disease. And he was sent undercover in some Lyme disease clinic. And the nurse was a Fae human hybrid. And I just made him a part of the story. And so he was like, you need to go home and write this down. And I was like, yeah, okay, no, I'm going to be a PA assistant. I'm going to be a PA. I'm going to go pump some faces full of Botox and I'm going to do this and that. And so he just kept pushing me and pushing me. And eventually I wrote the story down and here I am.
Yeah, interesting. One thing talking about is so we talk about is the inspiration for your book and then talk about the process of writing from an untrained author because a lot of people listening to this they want to write books either fantasy or nonfiction. How does someone just start writing?
I kind of joke and say, if you want to know what not to do, come talk to me, come sit next
Mhm.
to me, and you will learn everything not to do because I fell for every scam that is out there. All the author writing coaches,
Yeah.
I fell for it. Every bad editor, I probably know them. I didn't know what to do. So I have handwritten every novel because I didn't know what I was doing. And I do like handwriting. I like that whole muscle memory kind of thing, that tactile. So I would go home and pull out a journal and just start writing. I did not write in order. I did not sit there and go, chapter one. Did not do that. I just thought of a scene and wrote it and then
Mm.
jigsaw puzzled this together. I describe it like building a body. First is the skeleton. So I just wrote things down. And then I would go to the computer and start to put the meat on the bones a little bit. And that's where the first kind of process of editing would begin. Okay, this chapter goes here and this would go there. I wrote all 6 books at once, not knowing what I was doing because I would write and then go, oh, they're probably going to want to know where this came from. And I'd pick up another journal and write something down. And so I had all these journals with bits and pieces of books and then started to put it together. So the best advice I've given people is don't feel you have to be a certain type of writer. Oh, I have to do it this way. I have to go chapter one, chapter two. I have to have an outline. I think you just need to flow. Get something on a paper. You can't edit what's not there. So that would
Uh,
be my first piece of advice. Just write. You'll figure it out from there.
yeah, really, it sounds like because I knew of a lady, she was a sketch artist and she would actually just sketch. She would just sit down and sketch and she would sketch like faces. And what was interesting was there was nothing preconceived. She would do what she did as kind of themes or feelings. And what she sketched sometimes was like real life events, and which is it's really interesting, this kind of creative process. What role do you think like intuition, or just because I there was another author on the show, and she was talking about how she received kind of guidance. And she was, from her words, it was like the universe channeling her to create this book. What role does intuition, or I know you have a martial arts background as well as a movie background. What role did that play in your creative process?
I call myself a custodian of the characters. They tell me what to do. I don't sit there with a plan per se. I just write and they'll tell me. I've joked before that at 3 a.m. for some reason, that's like the witching hour when all the inspiration hits. I think that's because the logical mind quiets down and everything else comes to the surface. So I think that plays a huge part in it. I believe if you think too hard and you start to put yourself in a box of the books tell me, like all the how to books tell me to do this, that's where you lose the creativity. If you just flow and you let your intuition take over, things happen in more of an organic state. I joke that I was never going to put like younger Fae kids in my books. And then one night, this little Fae character playing cherry bomb skipped across my head at 3 a.m. and was like, "Excuse me, you're going to get up now and write my story. My name's Indiga and I'm a pain in the neck. Get up." And all of a sudden, Indiga was born, and she reminds me of Eloise in the Plaza, only a Fae. And her nickname was Little Big Mouth. And all of a sudden, the Fae Scooby Gang was born. And I had E and I had Indiga and Dora. And I was like, I did not plan on you guys. And you just blew what I was doing apart. And they took the story over. But to me, that was all intuition. It wasn't me being like, okay, I'm getting my little outline, nature versus nurture, and this and that. Everything you learned like from creative writing in high school was all just them saying, no, we're going in this direction. Here we go. Happens and you just flow with it. I think that's the best way to go. So I think intuition plays a huge part in it.
Yeah. When you say Fae, what do you mean? Not just for the audience, and what it sounds like, it's like a character, but just so that people are not lost.
The Fae are, to me, they're fairies, but my Fae, it's an acronym. So
Uh-huh.
it's the Fellowship Aegis of Earth, the Defenders of Earth. They were angels who are locked out of heaven. And so they must become something else. So they become what the humans will call fairies, but they're not little things with wings. We have one faction that are like that, will-o-wisps, but then there are dryads, there's mermaids, there's all different type, and they all come under the acronym of Fae. So there's light Fae and there's dark Fae, and they're brought into two different sects. And so from there, we have this whole world that's going on, and they go on to become the polytheistic gods and goddesses throughout time of human history. The Roman gods, the Egyptian gods, all of these things. That's what they are in my world. They and other people's universes are all different things. They're strict fairies or elves. In my world, they mean different things, but they're under the acronym of Fae.
Interesting. What role does martial arts as well as costume play in your creative process, as well as creating connection with the readers and your fans?
For me, martial arts was a huge factor because I love superhero movies. I'm a geek. What I hate is when you're watching a fight scene and all is a cape and a fist. And you're just like, what happened? And then the bad guys are just all over on the floor. And you're like, I have no idea, but something just happened. And you're like, I want to be a part of it. So when I do fight scenes, I do not do big sweeping battles. I don't ride horseback. So I'm not going to do it. I don't do archery. So I can't tell you that stuff. I try to write what I know. What I know is fighting. I was a forms competitor. I was points bar. I did continuous. So I can tell you what it's like to get punched in the face. I can tell you what it's like to kick somebody. So all my fight scenes usually do not have more than 4 people because I've done group sparring. That was something for my black belt tests and things like that, where 4 people on you figure it out. So all my fight scenes are done from experience, and I will take them. I will take my iPhone, set it up, and videotape the fight scene, and then figure out what point of view should I do it from. Is it from the attackers? Is it from the victims? What is it? And then figure out how to write it. So the reader feels immersed or can at least understand the body's there, the person's here. And I don't want them to feel lost. I want to figure out how can I explain it. Because if I tell somebody or they're reading crossing elbow, they're like, what's a crossing elbow? Somebody with martial art experience gets it. But someone else might be like, okay, do you make a cross with your elbow? What are you doing? So I want to make sure everybody understands. And one of the biggest compliments I got was when I was doing the audiobooks, which are being recorded right now. One of the narrators, Stefan from Skyboat Media, said, I've recorded hundreds of audiobooks. He's like, this was the clearest when it came to the fight scenes. And I thought, that's what I want to hear. Perfect. So that was a major factor for me. And martial arts helps guide that and hone it in to what I really want. Cosplay gave me the insight to what will these characters look like, feel like. I've dressed up like them. I figured out capes don't work when you're fighting. When you do the fight scene and you got a cape, you're like, nope, they're going to get it pulled. How long is the hair? Originally, the Power Brigade Angels, when they start out, they're the foot soldiers of the Archangels. They're not going to have long hair. It's going to get pulled in a fight. Fighting demons, you don't want to have a long ponytail. Demon's going to just yank it. So it was things like that. I had to really think about their armor and what would work. Knee pads, elbow pads. How would I figure that in? So cosplay does play a huge factor into making the characters feel as real as possible.
Interesting. Next question is I have for you is you've been candid about the underbelly of the publishing industry, and what are some of the most surprising or challenging aspects you've encountered as an author? What is the underbelly?
The stuff you don't see. When everybody thinks, oh, you've gotten signed, that's great. There is no advance anymore. Those days are long over. Nobody gives you a check and goes, here's $10,000. Go write that bestseller. There is no, we're going to sign you for 3 books. None of that happens anymore. I have been offered by one of the big 3. I have gone indie. I'm now self because you just got to do it yourself at this point. I've learned royalty. I've learned a lot about royalty statement. I've learned so much about royalty statement. And I've learned about everybody being transparent, quote unquote. I have learned at the end of the day, no one cares about your work the way you do. It is your baby. It's your creativity. You need to walk that line between having a death grip on it and not taking any criticism, learning when to let certain things go, when to being like, best, okay, do whatever you want. You gotta find that balance. And the end of the day, I've said this before, the publishing house is paying their bills. You are paying their bills. They need you to keep the electric on. They're going to tell you otherwise, and you will fall for it. I find that there is nothing out there to protect authors and their work. There really isn't. They can do whatever they want. You can sit there and approve a manuscript and send it to them. At the end of the day, they are going to decide what is most commercial. So you'll get your book and be like, yeah, this is great. And then you open it up to chapter 5 and you're like, where's that paragraph I approved? It's gone. Because they've decided commercially for whatever reason, this might offend this one, or we don't like that. And you're like, but that's not what I said. And okay, quality control isn't what it should be. I found X's in the middle of my book in a Word because of font issues. And it's just because it went to print. And they're like, it's fine. It's 1 word. Don't worry about it. We'll go back and fix it. I'm like, yeah, but the 200 books that went out have an X in the middle of the book. And they're like, I've been on the cover of my books in cosplay, which was not my decision. That was the publisher's. After 2.5 years of building me up as you're the cosplay cover girl, he decided to change it, put typeset. And I'm like, I spent so much money on making those costumes, which I had to pay for those photo shoots. Everybody's, oh, they paid for them. I'm like, no, I had to do it. And they're like, you think you had to do it? And I'm like, yeah. So now I've made all these costumes, I put all this money in. You just pulled me. So
Yeah.
it's things like that that people don't understand. They think everything is George R. R. Martin. It's no, sweetie pie. No, 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 no. You're making 15 cents off a book that everyone else is buying for $24.99. And you have no say over the price. Or people proofread it and go, you have a mistake on page 32. I'm like, yeah, and I got no say. I don't know. So it's a lot of the people don't quite get. So I felt at the end, I just needed to take control. And I went to self-publishing.
Yeah, interesting. It's almost the more I talk to creators these days, it's talking about owning and controlling your in basically your intellectual property. Coming from the it sounds like you a lot of coming from the like the gaming side. I don't know if you can speak about this intersection of AI and Web3 because Web3 is like allowing owners or creators to own and control their content and kind of kick out the middlemen. Are you able to talk about that?
A little bit in the sense I've had offers from certain things and controlling. What I will say without getting too much is I've had a lot of questions brought up just in general about AI. So I can go a little more general in that sense. I do believe cutting out the middleman is good in some respects. But the reason why I'm going to preface this is that going back to the publishing thing is you have to do your own marketing. A lot of people once again think, oh, you've been signed. They must have a whole marketing machine. No, it's up to the authors. So if you're doing your own publishing or you're doing your own marketing, even though you're signed and you have to do all these things, why not cut the middleman out to a point? Because you have to do it anyway. So in that sense, I get it. From the AI standpoint, I've had a lot of people, especially with character design right now, a lot of the artists out there are like, you shouldn't use AI. You're getting rid of us.
Mhm.
And I've had authors say, but you want $1,000 per character. I can't use it in the book. I can't do anything commercial with it. I can't even use it in a promo, or I have to pay you licensing fees and you're going to take 8 months to do it. Okay. Or I can go to Prompt Hero, take 6 courses for $100, learn how it's not harvesting, data harvesting from outside, and I'm not stealing it. Do it myself and I can do whatever I want with it. Choices. So I see both sides. Now, if I was to do a graphic novel, I'm not doing it through AI. I'm going to an actual comic book artist, which I'm talking to someone right now who is extremely talented. I would never think of going over their head and going to AI. But if we're talking about an illustration in my book, yeah, I'm going to use AI. I'm sorry. No, I'm not going to steal it. I am going to, with things I've done, I've picked my own picture and my cosplay pictures and turned that into something. So I know it's me. I'm not stealing from anybody. So I think there's a balance there, but I get why people are cutting out the middleman because a lot of authors have been worked over so many times. They're pulling their hair out and they're going, I've tried, or the contracts are so one-sided. Why time? It just gets to that point where you're like, I don't want to give over something I have worked 10 years for, and they're going to take it and do whatever they want with it. So, like I said, I can see both sides as someone who's been offered some of those things. And I've looked at it and gone, but this says I have to give up my right. What do you mean? And they're like, but this, and then they jargon it and you give it to the lawyer and the lawyer's, you're not really signing this, right? You're not even thinking of this. And I'm like, I was thinking about it because they're like, no, I do get it.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, because for example, like my YouTube channel, I use like a lot of AI. What's really interesting is the AI, the text to image now it's a little bit still clunky, but it's actually pretty good. And like I can generate hundreds of thumbnails for almost for free. Whereas if I go to editor, I got to pay him or her like 20, 30 bucks and you have to wait. And it's just so much more efficient. Yeah, it's really, I know AI is like a tool, so you can use it for things. And yeah, how can people find you? And I know you've got a YouTube channel, you've got Instagram, check out your works, etc.
Everybody can find me. Usually Instagram's the best place to get me. You can get me at Birth of the Fae _novel. But if you just type in Birth of the Fae, I pop up. That's where all my Fae news goes. So anything that's coming up with the books, anything like that, I post there. You can check me out on my YouTube channel, Danielle Orsino. I'm also on a Philly radio station, WWD 860 AM with Liberty Bell Smack Talk on Thursdays at 6 p.m., where I do a lot of sports talk for the New York Giants. Go Big Blue. Don't know how this season's going to turn out, but thumbs up on that and we're praying. So there's a couple different places you can catch me. As for the books, we have some new exciting things coming out. I'm re-editing the whole entire volume one, Birth of the Fae. So each book will be released with all of the deleted scenes that I always wanted to put in, but was not able to. And so that's all coming out. And then volume two is in fact done. So Birth of a Succubus will be coming out in 2025, which I'm really excited. And then we have an Oracle card set coming out as well.
Interesting. Yeah. Reminds me of Taylor Swift when, because I think she re-released all of her and then she was owning that. Sounds like what you're doing is same, and really interesting conversation. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.